Okay, this video is what I'm showing you represents about a month of work on my part. In other videos you've seen where water pooled up against that foundation right there because it's lower than this foundation. This foundation's at least an inch higher over about a 12-foot area than this foundation. So every time we had a rainstorm, all the water that came off these eaves and all the water that came off this lot right here pooled up against this foundation. What you're looking at now represents about a month of hard labor on my part. What I had to do is bring in lots and lots of dirt. There used to be about 4 or 5 inches of space between the stucco and the earth, and it created a trench. Once I got this top rock taken off, there was a trench up against that pad where water just migrated from this house over to here and set up against this pad. It pooled. So what I had to do is take wheelbarrow after wheelbarrow after wheelbarrow of dirt and place it up against that pad and take up that 4 or 5 inches of space. Now as you can see, it's sloped. And when I would put the dirt down, I'd take a tamper and tamp it down. So that's all hard packed. What we have here is this rod in the ground. This rod in the ground right here is the high spot. Right underneath that window was the narrowest spot where the ground, it was the narrowest between the ground and the stucco on the house. So the natural flow of land, it flowed that way out toward the golf course, and it flowed that way toward the street. So what I did is I drove a stake in the ground right at this high spot. It represented the high spot between the street and the backyard where that stake is. And as you can see, I sloped. I brought in dirt, wheelbarrow after wheelbarrow of dirt, and put it up against that foundation, and I packed it down. And this line right here, going out to that red spool of thread, mason line, represents the center between the two houses, the main body of the two houses. And what I did is, where that red spool is, and I'll walk down this line drops at about a bubble or a half a bubble of level drop down to this spool right here. I stretched the line from where I just was down to this spool, and all along whatever section I was working on, and I could only work on a section that was long enough, as long as this piece of metal that's in the ground. But I would take that piece of metal and I would let it follow the string so that it dropped uniformly and linearly from the stake back there to this stake. And I sloped. Now as you can see, it's more than 5 feet that way, or 6 feet. That's not the main body of the house. The main body of the house right there, we're center line with the main body of the house. Not only did I bring in dirt along this house pad, I also added dirt to that house pad to focus the water and have the water drain to the center where you see those stakes. I still have a lot of dirt that I have to put in to that house, and I still have to work going out toward the golf course. And as you can see, there's a crest between my property line and the lake. I still have to, even though in September I regraded the back of my lot and took off that crown, you can still see where there's a crown. And when I get the water flowing back between those two cement structures that surround the air conditioning unit, when I get back to the lot right off the patio, I have to regrade the lot so the water will flow onto the golf course, which is the ultimate retention basin. To come back here, what I did here is a transition area. We had a rainstorm about 3 weeks ago, and I didn't have any of this dug out. And the water pooled right here, so it showed me that I did the right job by sloping everything here. The water did follow this trench. It did collect from both houses, and it went to the center of the trench, and it followed the trench down to here, but it pooled right here because it had no way to get to the street. I spent about a week carving this trench out that's going to deliver the water to the street. I also removed the top rock here on this triangle, and I'm going to slope that triangle to where it follows this trench. And what I did to get the gradient of that trench is I stretched the line, that mason line, out to the sidewalk, and that trench drops at about a full bubble on the level to the sidewalk. So I plan to cover all this with 6mm plastic and maybe even tar paper on top of the 6mm plastic, and then I'm going to cover it all with crushed stone. But I still have to slope this, take all the bumps out of it, make it a nice uniform slope down to this trench here, and tamp it down before I lay down the plastic and the tar paper. But hopefully the water, as it comes off the roofs and it collects in the center of this trench right here, it'll run down here unencumbered and start following this trench that I'm following with the camera now, all the way to the sidewalk. And I want to show you, there's a rod down there, right there. If I get there's the rod I was talking about that I stretched the line to. So this trench right here that you're looking at followed a string line. Now I have it roughed out now. This is a rough draft. As I get this triangle flattened out and sloped correctly, I'm going to re-stretch the string. I may add a little bit of elevation out here at the street to where the water stays up and ends at the surface of the sidewalk. But that's my solution for what the builder did to me 10 years ago. The builder 10 years ago intentionally lowered the finished floor elevation of this house right here and made it lower than both houses on each side. That house over there is at least an inch higher than this house. This house is out of compliance with the proposed accepted gradient plans for this neighborhood. This house was supposed to be built at least an inch higher. If it would have been built an inch higher and my backyard would have been graded correctly, I wouldn't have had that problem. The water would have centered, but I've now had to artificially, and I'm vertically challenged because this lot is lower, or this house is lower than that house. I've had to do quite a bit of engineering and a lot of work What you're looking at here, this strip of land that falls away, not only does it fall away from the house, but from that stake off in the distance, it falls at a uniform rate down to this stake. That's been a lot of work. That tamper that I tamp with weighs about 30 or 40 pounds. And I probably, if you want a good exercise, try tamping, lifting that up and down for a day, a couple of thousand times. But this is what I've done. The builder, the HOA, they haven't lended me a hand. I've done this all on myself at my expense. This should have been done. I should have help from the builder. They're the ones that created this mess, and they're doing nothing to help me. And they're not putting any money into it. This is going to be all onto this is a loss of my equity. All this work I've done, I've been at this now for over a month. What you're looking at with this camera represents over a month of work, daily, on my part.